Welcome back to Rethinking Politics, episode 105. I'm Dan, I'm here with Brad. We're going to talk some news and we're going to get into some of the current economics and things. Sorry, it's been a week since we've been here. It's a changing time in our lives, both of us with young kids.
It's mostly my fault, but Dan can take some of the blame.
I will, and starting new work and just different things like that. So there are a number of things that have been under development here. Interesting changes in the world and the big news items. One of those is that the Russia and Ukraine war is at a strange place. There was a significant counteroffensive, I believe we mentioned it before, from Ukraine, in which they pushed Russia out of a lot of the north and northeastern part of Ukraine. At this point, they've successfully cleared more areas. There was a story I was listening to where they took back this area that Russia had claimed. If you didn't know this, Russia at some point here said, these are the lands we're claiming, and they drew them on a map, and they said, this is ours now. These places have joined us through legitimate, I don't know if they said election, but they've chosen to be with us essentially, and they're now ours. And the Ukrainian forces went into one of the cities, and an American reporter was talking to people, or maybe it was a European reporter, but it was someone who was not Ukrainian, was talking to people in this little village, this small city. I guess a little village and small city can mean two very different things. I don't know the size of this. It was sizable enough that we have a journalist there, right? So probably somewhat significant, but anyway, the person had no idea, because they hadn't had internet for a while, that Russia had claimed them, and that they were supposedly in Russia at that point.
So it's not even that the people were on board with the change. The change was so poorly executed, it wasn't even communicated to the people.
Yeah, they didn't know.
That's
they just
impressive.
Been living their daily lives, yeah. So anyway, that gives you some sense of how firm it is. And Russia said things like, we're going to defend our new territory. But then later, Russia indicated in a public announcement that the borders weren't firm and were still being worked out.
No duh.
Which is true, right? Because you have Ukrainian soldiers pushing into them as we speak. Which puts Russia in an interesting place internally. They're getting a lot of pushback from the youth, the people that would be fighting in the war, right? They're trying to mobilize more troops. They're trying to do different things. And to some degree, you can see why this has pushed them into a position where they feel like, given the series of bad choices they made up to this point, I don't want to make it feel like this is inevitable, but they're threatening nuclear war. They're saying, we've got nuclear weapons. We're going to use them.
To be fair, Dan, you should say they're threatening nuclear war again. You know, Putin has always had one stick that he likes to rely on. Some might argue that part of the idea with the annexation was to try and make it look more like a defensive war, saying, hey, we just want this territory and we're just going to hold it. This territory is actually Russia, which is silly because, I mean, that's one of the original things they said early on, is they're defending, Crimea and these other areas that they had stolen earlier. You can tell which side I'm biased towards. I'm not even pretending to care at all about Russia's half of this argument, But yes, this is not the first time that Putin has threatened a nuclear attack. This one is a little bit more specific. He's talking about like using nuclear weapons against Ukraine. I still don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. I don't think he's that stupid. But the thing is it doesn't really cost him anything to threaten nuclear war, because threatening nuclear war is not a legitimate reason to use nuclear weapons. No one's going to nuke Russia for threatening to use nukes. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so he can threaten it as much as he wants, and in the hopes of limiting how much help Ukraine gets. Right now Ukraine, I believe, just completed the application, which means they started it. You know what I mean? But the application to join NATO, which is something that a year ago they weren't going to do. And so that's a huge policy shift on their part, which makes sense. There's, the whole reason not to join NATO is because Russia's going to attack you.
You want to get invaded by Russia. Yeah,
exactly. So if Russia's already invading, you might as well join, right? But I've wondered if perhaps the nuclear threats are directed towards NATO, saying don't join this battle because you won't like what happens. You know what I mean? If it's just us fighting Ukraine, we probably won't do anything. But if we feel like the whole world's turning against us, well, the whole world may go up in smoke.
Yeah, and like you said, there's not really anything to lose by making this threat, which should be taken into consideration if you're thinking, wow, this is a big threat.
Mm-hmm.
It's not from their perspective. And obviously, if they actually carried it out, it would be, the consequences would be dramatic.
And to be clear, there's only nothing to lose because Putin is already a pariah. You know what I mean? Because the world is already sanctioning him. You know what I mean? It's kind of like North Korea. Once you cut off from everyone else, now there's nothing to lose.
Yes, that's right. If he had done this at a different point in time or does it again later when circumstances are different, there would be more consequences. But right now, I mean, what are we going to do?
Send more money to Ukraine?
Yeah. It's in a situation where it probably won't make his current situation worse. And so he's comfortable making this threat. And I've been surprised scanning through Twitter to see people whose opinions I respect on a variety of things taking the threat seriously. In fact, Biden, this was surprising to me because I guess I didn't know how Biden would interpret it. But Biden said we are the closest we've been to nuclear war since, what did he compare it to? The Cuban Missile Crisis, I think. And that could be true.
That could technically be true. I mean, when's the last time someone threatened, nuclear war? Like literally said, hey, we might use nukes.
Right. That may very well be true. But that doesn't mean we're close to nuclear war, right? That it can be true that it's the closest we've been, but we're also not actually close. So anyway, I don't think they're going to use nuclear weapons, and that obviously, that could happen. But if I had to guess the odds, I would say, at least 95% chance that they're not even considering it. That this is just part of trying to position better, and like you said, Brad, I think trying to reframe the war as defensive is important, even if no one in the world buys it, except their own people, because they're actually having a hard time finding the young men in their country. People who are starting to be like, I'm going to get pulled into this war, and this war is stupid. And so the young men are disappearing. They're hiding. They're avoiding things. There are protests still happening in a country where you can get thrown in jail forever for such things. It's just, there's a lot of pushback internally.
Yeah, not to mention, even though Putin does have a lot of control, there are other people with power in Russia that he needs to at least placate to some degree. You know what I mean? And
yes.
And at this point, I'm sure with the Ukraine war, people have to be wondering, those people with influence, with some degree of power, what's our end game here? You know what I mean? We were supposed to just charge into Ukraine and just dominate them. That failed. We were then supposed to, do this and do that, and that's failed. And now we're actually losing ground against this small country, and
it's humiliating.
And I'm not seeing any exit strategy that doesn't result in us getting pushed all the way back into our own country and looking like complete idiots. You know what I mean? And so I think Putin is definitely trying to save face. Maybe he was trying to secretly negotiate and say, hey, just give us this and we can call a ceasefire. But my guess is now that Ukraine's got the upper hand, they're not interested. I mean, Zelensky has said as much, that he has no interest in working with Putin. He has no interest in backing down because he tastes the victory. He realizes that Putin is running out of steam, both politically and militarily.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really like our initial reaction to this, Brad. Do you remember? I remember what I thought.
We thought it was going to be over one way or another very quickly.
Very quickly. Likely that Russia would just steamroll through, if maybe they could mount some meaningful resistance for a brief time, and then it would be over unless outside militaries intervened, which didn't seem like they were going to. And so, yeah, there were conversations from good analysts who were seemingly good analysts. Maybe this undermines that credibility, who were saying things like, yeah, best case scenario, even this was after Russia started to hit its initial snags. They were saying things like, best case scenario, Ukraine is able to stall this out and it becomes worse for everybody in some ways because the war lasts longer and gets bloodier.
Mm-hmm.
That has not been the case. Russia has really, really fumbled this at every level. And now they do look stupid. And there's a group of patriots in Russia, as there are in every country, who are looking at this and they are really upset about how stupid they look and about how incompetent it all looks. And they're partially the group that are pushing, like, maybe we should nuke somebody. Show them the might of Mother Russia, or something like that. I'm sure that's exactly how they talk.
Oh, yeah. Anyways, it's crazy.
Elon Musk is one of those people who is afraid that this would devolve into nuclear war, even recently, and so he proposed an exit strategy, and got a lot of pushback. Zelensky was not happy. He said, which he made Elon has a funny way of making polls on Twitter, and people are copying him, and Zelensky copied it, and he said, which Elon do you like better, pro-Russia or pro-Ukraine? Which, of course, is a silly way to think of it, but Zelensky's made his credit where credit's due. Zelensky has made his stand. He's made it absolutely clear we're not surrendering. We're going to push back, and I think rightfully deserves a significant amount of credit for how this war has turned out in favor of Ukraine, despite the odds.
Mm-hmm.
But also, Elon Musk trying to be prudent and not get into a nuclear war is understandable, but I think that's too cautious. I don't think Russia would dare do it. But Elon Musk is in the news for another reason.
And he's always in the news, Dan.
That's true. That's true. I say that like that. You may not know that. If you follow anything regarding tech or are ever on Twitter, Elon Musk is generally trending. There's something about the man he's got real star power in a strange way. He is a true celebrity at this point. Has been for some time. But the saga of him buying Twitter has been the most, what's the word?
Bizarre.
Boring roller coaster. It's like a bad drama movie where the stakes are really low, but they keep like playing into the drama of it, and it keeps going back and forth. Like, is she going to get the man or not? And it's like arbitrary barriers.
And you reach a point where you're like, why am I even watching this show?
Yes, that's what I'm feeling like with this Twitter thing. So the quick recap is Elon Musk wanted to buy Twitter and he made an offer. But they didn't want to accept the offer. But because of the nature of the business and the way a public business works, they essentially had to, on behalf of the shareholders, because it was a good offer.
Mm-hmm.
So the board finally accepted. Elon took a closer look. This is the public story, right? We'll guess a little bit at his motivations. He took a closer look, said there are too many bots on the platform. You've deceived me. I want out. Now, in the background of this, the economy's crashing. Twitter's value is plummeting, right? And it looks like he could have made them a much smaller offer.
Yeah, it looks like a maneuver in order to get the business for less, you know.
Yes, it looks like a bargaining step where you go, actually, I don't want to buy you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Twitter then sued him, and there's been an ongoing case, and they're trying to get what's the legal term for it? Specific obligation, specific action. You can actually, through the court, force someone to fulfill a contract and not just pay the penalty. And so that's what they've been trying to do. They're like, no, we're going to make you buy us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're going to marry me whether you love me or not.
Yep. Because you said you would.
You said you would. We have it on paper.
And so then Elon turns around and says, okay, let's do it. I will
out
pay
of nowhere.
I will pay full price. You know, I'll pay the $44 billion, and you don't have to go through with the court case. We're done. You know, settle outside of court for everything you're asking for. And Twitter, of course, rationally responds with, no, we're going to continue with the court case. We're not accepting that offer of full price. To which point, I'm just scratching my head. I don't understand. I don't even know what to track anymore. Like what is going on here? Obviously, people aren't sharing their real motivations, which makes it more difficult. The layers of deception here in the business world are weird.
Yeah,
but I feel like there's something we're missing.
There's definitely something we're missing here for Twitter to be trying to force him to buy them. And when he says, okay, fine, they say no. Right? It's weird. I don't know what they can get out of the court case. Perhaps through the court case, they can get the same price plus a little interest. But that seems really risky to try and push that when he's actually offering you right now. I don't know. I don't know what the motivation is here. It's weird. Maybe they don't want to do it yet. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, or if they don't want to do the deal at all, then why did they sue him when he backed out? You know what I mean? Why didn't they just let him walk away?
Yeah, they could have taken the broken contract, $1 billion. If they want him to walk away, they can take $1 billion and call it good. Yeah. Instead, they're pushing for the actual... No, don't make him pay what you get when you break the contract. Force him to uphold the contract. Anyway, like what you were saying, Brad, there's something here we're missing. And it's clear that there's maneuvering happening here, right? I think the beginning was maneuvering from Musk. I think this is maneuvering from Twitter. I just don't know to what end this last move is going to get them. I don't know where they're going with that.
So if anyone's got some insight, hit us up.
Please tell us. I'm curious. This may be a B-rate, a B-rated TV series at best. Maybe not even that high. This is like a paperback novel or something. But I'm invested. I've come too far now. I need to know how it ends.
But preferably without watching all those commercials.
Yeah, that's right. Preferably without commercial breaks. And I'm willing to skip to the last page and call it good. I don't need the details at this point. Okay, so back to, as a side note, I think to reiterate our position, because it's been months that this has been going on, I would love for Elon Musk to buy Twitter. Mm-hmm. I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
I think the world would be a better place with Elon Musk owning Twitter as a private business that he can then make the policies and say, no, this is how we're going to run it. I think he would have a really hard time because the employees there are cut from one mold, and it's not the free speech mold. But that's his problem, and he wanted that problem when he agreed to buy it, so whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to own Twitter, but I'm glad someone does.
Yeah, I'm glad someone does who at least shares my general opinion of maybe how it should deal with
free speech
political
stuff.
Speech. Yeah.
Because that is one of the biggest areas where he differs from the current Twitter executives. Anyways,
yes.
on another note, recent news this week, President Biden has announced marijuana reform just a couple days ago now. The White House has got a nice statement from him announcing 3 things that he's doing to reform the approach to marijuana, which of course piqued my interest immediately. One of our very first episodes was on how stupid drug laws are, so reform, all for it. So he announced a 3-pronged policy.
That's putting it delicately there, Brad. That's good of you. Very diplomatic.
I am the diplomacy king. If you guys haven't noticed on this podcast, I make people feel so good, even as I'm absolutely obliterating their views and ideas. Anyways, as I was saying, the first prong is he announced a pardon of all prior federal offenses of simple possession of marijuana, which sounds awesome, right? So there's going to be, he's directed the Attorney General is going to be issuing these pardons to all eligible individuals. So I hear that and I'm like, that sounds awesome. Okay. what does that actually mean? How many people are in prison right now just for a federal offense of marijuana possession? Answer, Dan, how many would you guess? Wait, did I already tell you the answer?
How many people federal level? You did. This may bias my guess a little bit. I could give you any number and just as a random roll of the dice. I'd say maybe 6,000.
I did not mean to turn this into a reality TV series, which anyways. Didn't mean to get you the canned answer there. The answer is 0. There are 0 people who are in prison for just a federal offense of simple marijuana possession. There are a couple reasons for that. The first reason is that it's not typically a federal offense. It's usually a state offense. And so this doesn't apply to that. And often, if it is a federal case, it's because there are other charges beyond marijuana possession. So there are about 6,000 people who do have a prior federal conviction for marijuana possession, who are either in prison for other things as well, or they're not in prison at all, and it is still on their record. And so getting that pardoned is going to help these people, right? Those 6,000 people, it's going to help them by having this pardoned. But that's a drop in the bucket. You know what I mean? When you think about the fact that there are millions of people with varying drug charges on their records, 6,000 people, it's a drop in the bucket. So the second prong is he's urging all governors to issue pardons for state offenses for simple possession of marijuana, which is a fun idea. It's not going to happen. By definition, if it's a red state, the governor's going to flat out say no. And if it's a blue state, the governor's probably going to say no, because governors and presidents have a really hard time pardoning people because the voting populace does not like it. They do not like people to get pardoned. Sorry, Dan, you said something about me being diplomatic before, and I'm trying to honor that. I was going to follow that up with because people are stupid, but thought I shouldn't say that, and then explained that I was going to not say that. So luckily no one's going to be offended by me saying I was going to call everyone stupid. Well, just the voting populace. People are stupid.
Brad and I were talking before this episode about what we wanted to talk about, and it became very quickly clear that if you could take a rain check from work because of you're in a bad mood or maybe not the best mindset, this would be a day where we would do that. We're not feeling particularly charitable today. And the word stupid came up more times than it probably ever has in any of our conversations. We try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt and try and make the best case we can, even for the ideas we disagree with. Some days are harder than others for that.
So anyways, to defend my argument that people who are opposed to governors pardoning people for simple marijuana possession are stupid is because being in prison for just a marijuana possession charge is absolutely idiotic. Marijuana is not nearly a hardcore narcotic that some people think it is. I think that's becoming more and more clear to people.
Yeah.
And so arresting people simply for possessing marijuana is as idiotic, no, probably more idiotic than, the 1920s prohibition on alcohol that just resulted in all sorts of negative side consequences. And people being tough on crime is one thing, but more often than not, it actually translates into this weird prejudice towards criminals. You know what I mean? That criminals are bad regardless of what crime they've committed. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when you talk about things like prison reform, one of the reasons it often struggles to get off the ground is because they're like, well, they're criminals, so I don't care if they have horrible living conditions. I don't care if they're getting attacked by their fellow inmates. They're criminals, and thus they're evil. Ignoring the fact that everyone breaks laws on a regular basis, some people on a daily basis, that if you were charged for all of those laws, you would be in prison too. But the reason you're not, it's because the laws you're breaking either aren't being noticed or the government isn't as interested in enforcing. And so treating criminals as evil is idiotic, because there are plenty of evil criminals, right? You know what I mean? There are murderers, there are rapists who are evil, absolutely. But then translate, equating those with people who have a simple marijuana possession is stupid. So anyways, the governors are stupid, the people are stupid. Third prong. Did I call enough people stupid there, Dan, or was I being too soft?
The governors and the non-governors. I think you got them all.
That is the two categories of people that most people use.
You can take any category and say this and all non-this, and I think you get everybody. Draw the line anywhere you want as long as you get both sides. It's everyone.
The third prong of Biden's approach is he is asking the Secretary of Health and Human Services and the AG, the Attorney General, to review why marijuana is scheduled as a Class 1 drug and see about changing it. So right now, marijuana is scheduled as a Schedule 1 controlled substance, which means that it's the highest classification, the worst classification, the one that's there for things like heroin, hardcore narcotics that are going to be extremely restricted and have other penalties associated with it, different criteria for all sorts of things, whether that's prescribing it to people, doing research on it. Everything changes based off of these schedules. And right now, marijuana is right up there with heroin. It's even higher than drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine, which is nuts, right?
Yeah, it is. There's no way you could rank them where it would be more extreme than those two. Like it just doesn't make any sense, especially meth.
Meth is hardcore, but fentanyl is basically heroin. So why fentanyl, isn't the Class 1 drug has to do, I'm sure, with the pharmaceutical industry, because fentanyl was first and foremost a prescription drug, right?
Right.
So if a company prescribes it, then it can't be that bad. But if it's a plant growing on the ground that no one is prescribing, let's make it a Class 1. Schedule 1. That's class, tier schedule.
The real threat is not people hyped up on meth, Brad. It's people just being super chill. We cannot have that.
I submit that this is all targeting the munchie industry. They're trying to get it shut down.
That's right. It's brilliant. We're going to start a conspiracy theory right now.
Conspiracy
theory. Yeah, this is it. Actually, the government for years has been trying to get people healthier. And what they're going to do is they're going to categorize this as much higher, because we all know that things like Cheetos and Doritos, which are the go-to munchie for someone who's got the munchies, are really unhealthy. And so it's just a backdoor way to try and help everybody be healthier.
Exactly. When's the last time you were hanging out with a buddy who's like, you know what? We're going to go over to our friend's house. We are going to, we're going to make some fun brownies. We're going to get high, and then we're going for a run. You know what I mean? When's the last time that happened? Where you had some THC brownies and then went for a run. Never happened. THC brownies and a snack? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's
in fact, the brownies themselves, right? This is a health conspiracy.
I didn't even think. So stupid. Well, as a non-governor, I do fall into that stupid category, so that's fair.
Can I be neither a governor nor a non-governor?
No. Unfortunately, that is not how this system works. So,
logic has trapped me again.
Welcome to the party.
Keeps defeating all of my best plans.
See, that's a great example of falling into the trap of accepting their argument, where they say, hey, if you're a governor, you're stupid. If you're a non-governor, you're stupid. You're like, but is there a third category? Instead of saying, no, I don't accept that being a non-governor makes me stupid,
Yeah, maybe. I was thinking I would jump into the moving right along. Moving right along. Wait, are you finished with your 3 prongs?
Those are the 3 prongs. Now I need to talk about how I feel about it.
Yes. Okay.
First of all, I'm very happy about this, right? This is something that we thoroughly support the White House in doing. It doesn't do nearly as much as, you might hope it would do. Obviously, as we covered, it's only a drop in the bucket in terms of what it's actually doing. Urging governors to do something probably won't do anything. The 3rd prong is the most promising. If we can get that rescheduled as a Schedule 2 or Schedule 3 or Schedule 7, I don't actually know how many schedules they are, but this one should be pretty low on it. That would be huge. But the other thing that's big is that you have a sitting president taking a concrete stand, in favor of decriminalizing marijuana. That's really what this is. It's not about legalizing it here. There's nothing here about legalizing marijuana, but there is things here about making efforts to decriminalize marijuana. And that is a big deal. There's already been push in several states, to legalize it, to add, medical marijuana options, all of these things that are taking steps. This is a big step in that direction in terms of how it's perceived publicly. And I hope that, that all the conservatives out there can get off the anti-Biden horse for a second and realize this is actually a good thing, regardless of how you feel about Biden. For me, it's easy because I already agree with everything Biden does to hop on this one as well and be like, yes. Once again,
you just rubber stamp it.
Yeah. Once again, yes. His Inflation Reduction Act fixed inflation. You know what I mean? Everything he's done has been perfect, and this just continues on that trend. But for the rest of you, just try and realize that this is actually a good thing, even if you don't like
try and run along next to the train. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like this. I think the direction's good. I think the steps taken are good, and I think that's a rare thing in any government action lately. So we'll take that. We'll take that. I know what conservatives will be saying, Brad. Well, not all of them, because some of them are on board with some changes at this point in the drug war. It's certainly a growing number, but a lot of them will say, "But what about the impact on society if a bunch of people start smoking marijuana?" What do you have to say to that?
Thank you for your feedback. That is an excellent question.
I will refer it to my supervisor.
I was going to say, I don't think I'm in the headspace to have a healthy discussion with you today. I would love to engage meaningfully with you. But right now, I just want to call you names. And so let's put a pin in it, and I'll get back to you. No, seriously, ask me the question one more time.
So clearly, let's pretend, let's assume that the worst thing that happens from marijuana is that people become less healthy. Not significantly. We'll say less for now. Obviously, the studies need to be done on this, and it's been illegal to do them. So the data isn't great. Marijuana is one of those weird things where the states have defied the national laws in a way you're not supposed to be able to do in theory. They've nullified them. They've said, we're not going to enforce those laws. We're going to do something different. This is the idea of nullification.
Yeah, can we talk about how awesome that is and how successful they've been? Booyah.
It's been wonderfully successful. Anyway, and so it's in a weird place, but to have federal movement is good. So conservatives are going to say, I don't want everybody around me to be smoking marijuana. It's going to make the world a worse place.
Okay, so there's a really easy answer for that. If you don't want people around you smoking the marijuana, please move to Singapore. That's your only option because everyone is already smoking weed. You will bump into someone today if you leave your house who is currently smoking marijuana, who is currently high. Everyone is doing it. Especially, and that includes all of the states where it's illegal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's been illegal in the entire country for decades, you know what I mean, with everyone smoking it. Now there are a few states where it's legal and a few states with, medical cards. and people are still, smoking it or consuming it in a variety of ways. So if your goal is to not be around it, you've already failed. But if your concern is that more people are going to do this bad thing because of the law changing, that's possible. That's absolutely possible that more people will do it.
You were saying earlier,
fundamentally, what?
I was just going to say, we mentioned earlier that people tend to interpret the law as people who break the law are bad, people who keep the law are good. There's a moral stigma that inevitably accompanies the law. Not inevitably, but mm-hmm. It affects people, right? Some people will perceive things as evil based on the law or good based on the law.
Yeah, and that may be the fundamental difference between marijuana now and alcohol during the Prohibition, is the Prohibition came out of nowhere. So everyone was like, yeah, a year ago, this was legal and it was okay. Now it's not. And so people didn't have that moral stigma. They're like, no, we like to drink. We've been drinking and it wasn't a problem. Now the government says it's a problem, right? But unlike that, it's been illegal for so long that there is that moral stigma attached to it. That, yeah, drinking alcohol may or may not be good for you, but it's fine. But morally, smoking marijuana has this evil edge to it, mm-hmm. which is stupid. You know what I mean? Smoking marijuana is it's like smoking a cigarette. You know what I mean? It offends some people, doesn't offend others. Some people find it gross. Some people, you know what I mean, don't. And that's just fine. That's called life. You know what I mean? That's what so many things are. There are tons of things that you can buy right now that I think are gross. And there are things that I don't think are gross that other people find gross. Going back to those Cheetos again. You know what I mean? But the answer isn't to legislate everything that you personally don't like out of existence, but rather don't consume them.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right.
Don't hang out with people who smoke marijuana if you don't want to be around it. You know what I mean? You can still have laws. I mean, look at what we have right now. We have laws where you can't smoke cigarettes in a bunch of public spaces. And more importantly, you got a lot of businesses who say, yeah, you can't smoke a cigarette in my business. And so people smoke cigarettes by themselves. They smoke them in their 25 feet away areas, and they smoke them at home. And so as someone who doesn't like cigarette smoke, I don't have to be exposed to it. And guess what? People around me smoke all the time. I work at a warehouse. Probably, at least a quarter of my crew smoke cigarettes, right? People who are actively smoking, and yet they don't do it around me. You know what I mean? And it doesn't bother me. It's not a problem, even though they're doing something that I personally am not a big fan of. You know what I mean? And if they were smoking in my office while I was trying to get work done, it would really be a problem for me. You know what I mean? And so acting as if making it legal means that people are going to be smoking marijuana in your home against your permission is just inaccurate.
Yeah, it's really interesting because as you're talking, there's a couple different arguments that crop up that are really important these days. One of them is from the liberals, in which they say that to do things that I don't like harms me. Right? And there's stress. The argument goes something like this: that stress causes your cells to act in certain ways that effectively shortens their lifespan, and that's accurate in some sense. Stress harms you in some sense. That being said, not if you were to live without any stressors, you have lived an absolutely hollow life, and it's probably extremely unhealthy for you. So I'm sure, medically speaking, that we were built to take tension and difficulty and become stronger for it. So I'm sure there's a bigger picture story to that, medically speaking. But that's one side of it, right? This idea that you can harm me by saying things that distress me. The social conservatives, so the path you were walking there with conservatives, I think neatly divides the natural rights conservatives from the natural rights conservatives from the common good conservatives. And the natural rights conservatives see a sphere of independence around each individual that allows them to act and make mistakes within it. Whereas the social conservatives are like, what's good for society? And and clearly everybody doing drugs is not good for society in some sense, right? Or so that, and thus we should stop it this way. We can act as a social group to stop it. But there is and the distinction there is a moral one at a basic level about what you think individual people should be trusted with regards to their own lives and the limits of how they can affect the people around them. And in the short answer from, like, to state what is sometimes viewed as a downside of a natural rights case very plainly is, yes, I don't get to stop all kinds of behavior that does indirectly impact me in some way. Say you're living with a roommate or a family member, and that family member starts just binging terrible food and staying up late and playing music loud, right? All of these things are fairly benign as far as things they could be doing go.
But cumulatively, it's annoying.
Does this affect you? Absolutely, yes, yes. Does this harm you in both senses? Does it stress you? Is it good for them? Are they going to be a good roommate that encourages you in your life and helps support you in the things that are good for you? No. Both the social conservatives and the liberals would have to find that this behavior cannot be tolerated, which puts you where? It puts you in the position where you control everybody's life. And you then begin to, like, if you are going to have that kind of power, then what life can someone live? What human life is available? Only a good one, right? That's exactly right. What human life is available, because humans are full of mistakes. And in the interplay between the good things in us and the bad things in us and those around us, and trying to be a better influence and trying to, get our craft together, and all, like, that is where almost all of the meaning in life is found. And all of that is going to be government business. All of that is going to be handled with force and violence.
No, and what's so interesting about that is this is one reason why social conservatives or common good conservatives argue so hard about what's good and what's not, what's right and what's wrong against the liberals, because they fundamentally agree with liberals that it is the role of government to interfere with society in order to make it better. And so their argument then rests on, well, what does better look like? You know what I mean? Versus natural rights conservatives and, libertarians like us say, no, it's not about what good society looks like. It's not about what we want to see other people doing. It's simply not the role of government to make people better. Yeah. It's the role of government to stay out of our lives unless we are violating someone else's rights.
Yes.
I mean that in the most concrete sense.
Yes. Yeah. I would phrase it differently. I agree with that completely. I would phrase one part of that even stronger, that not only is it not the role, but it's not possible for them to make people better. Imagine the apparatus to go in and impose.
I like that.
On these circumstances. The people who are going to be doing it are going to be acting as truly as like tyrants, abusive tyrants dealing with children. is the position they've put themselves in with absolute power to determine what is right and what is right for everybody and to impose it. But beyond that, what does that do, Brad, if your relationship and my relationship are governed by a third party? What is our relationship at that point? What would be the meaning of our friendship if the terms of it are dictated by some kind of, social vision of what it means to be a good human being that is forced upon you? Like,
and the answer is I don't know, because it would destroy our relationship.
It would destroy our relationship. That's exactly what I was.
It would destroy it and replace it with something else.
What's interesting is in the worst tyrannies. One of the trippiest things. Tacitus writes about this in his writings under the Roman emperors. Tacitus, the Annals.
Mm-hmm.
He had this passage that really moved me, where he's talking about how loyalty to the government became the big thing. Loyalty I believe it was under Tiberius, and as Tiberius became more paranoid, to prove your loyalty, people would start to turn in other people as traitors. If you wanted to, how do you signal that you are not a traitor? You find traitors, and it got so bad, and he was so paranoid, and the system became so corrupt that people would do this to friends and relatives. And they would turn them in if they said the wrong things. This kind of thing actually happened in Russia and in China at different points, and still happens in North Korea. He writes about what happened to the relationships, that ultimately this destroyed all relationships, and probably not all of them. That's probably too far, but that's the way he describes it.
But generally speaking,
yes, because at that point, trusting people was foolish. But anyway, it's just interesting and I'm not trying to draw a direct parallel there, because the conservative who believes that you should treat other people with respect, and that you should not do drugs and not do these things, and that you should say, whatever it may be in a personal relationship. Anywhere they're going to draw a line is going to be arbitrary. Why not? If it's good not to tell lies, let's stop people from lying. Right? Let's make people tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
If it's good to do these things, and it's okay for us to impose on them, where is the line? It seems only limited by technology.
And a great example for this, going back to marijuana, for those conservatives who are still listening to this, and they're like, for those who haven't turned it off, which is fair.
I'm glad that you threw that in there, because all those people aren't going to hear it anyway.
But maybe we could excerpt this and send it to them. Sorry. What was I going to say? It was a good point. Oh, that yeah, if we can all agree that marijuana is bad for you and it's bad for society and therefore we should stop it, liberals often do the same thing with other things that a lot of people agree are bad for you. I mean, look at, cities who ban large soft drinks, because the data is clear that drinking a soft drink is just not good for you. You know what I mean? There's no pressing need to drink 64 ounces of soda in one sitting. You know what I mean? When you're at a restaurant, there's no need for it, right? No one is going to die if that doesn't happen. And it's conclusively bad for them. As someone who drinks soda regularly, I'm well aware of how bad it is for you. You know what I mean?
Yes. There's no redeeming quality here.
Well, there's a redeeming quality. It's delicious, just like there's a redeeming quality for marijuana. You know what I mean? It has positive things. Otherwise, people wouldn't do it. But if you're weighing it objectively as a society, you can easily say, yeah, this isn't worth it for people. You know what I mean? Drinking soda generally is not worth it. If we didn't have soda in the United States, it never existed, the general health of the United States would go up a couple notches just with that one change, right?
Probably be visibly different.
It would be visibly different. Obesity would be better. Other health problems would be better. I mean, the data is there, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that what are you doing? You're taking away people's agency. You're taking away my ability to say, yes, I know this is bad for me, and I understand the risks, and I'm willing to accept those risks and drink 4 Mountain Dews while I sit down at my dinner table. You know what I mean? And And that's the same thing with marijuana or any other vice, because there are a whole lot of them out there. You know, it's not just cigarettes, it's not just alcohol, which are both incredibly destructive, right? Sugar's not the only thing that's incredibly destructive. Alcohol is destructive, you know, cigarettes are destructive, marijuana. There's a whole list of things that are bad for you.
Alcohol should be gone. Like if you were going to do this with alcohol absolutely would be gone.
If you're banning marijuana because of the negative health effects to people and the negative effects that it causes people to do, then you have to ban alcohol because it's much worse. But that's not what you want to do because you've decided that just this one thing is bad. Why? Because it was already illegal. And that's just not logical. Because laws can change. It wasn't always illegal, and it doesn't have to always be illegal, just like alcohol.
Yeah, this has got me thinking a lot. Because I know that the pragmatist listening to this could say, yeah, we can't ban alcohol because it's impractical too, right? The people wouldn't stand for it, obviously. But there are certain things you can ban, certain things you can change, and yeah, you can't impose a complete moral code on people, but you can impose around the edges. You can make them, you can change some of the terms and say you can't say this or this. You can't say racial slurs. You can't, you need to call people by their pronouns with the transgender things, or you need to, that you and I are catastrophizing by looking at worst case scenarios to demonstrate the principle when a pragmatist would say, actually, you can just fiddle around the edges and not necessarily, in a fiddle around the edges is usually a bad phrase, but in this case, you can cut very carefully, you can be very precise, and you can change a few things, and society would be better off than it would be otherwise. You can keep marijuana illegal.
Yeah, and the argument to that, Dan, is very simple, is that marijuana is not an edge product. That millions of people consume marijuana in the United States. And so what you do in terms of criminalizing marijuana has a widespread effects. You know what I mean? People are arrested because of marijuana on a regular basis. People's lives are completely upended because of marijuana laws on a regular basis. I mean, so many businesses drug test for marijuana primarily because of the state laws that are associated with it, or federal laws, etc. You know what I mean? So because of the illegality, these businesses test for it. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if you consume marijuana, which, by the way, stays in your system a freakishly long time. So people are like, oh, well, yeah, you can't be high on marijuana when you're at work. It's like, no, we're saying you can't even smoke marijuana once a month and work a job that drug tests for it reliably. You know what I mean? And so that creates a whole new problem for people who consume marijuana, where they can't work in whole industries and in whole job categories because of that. You know what I mean? And all sorts of things that come with it. This is not an edge problem. This is a real problem that's hurting people. It may not be hurting you specifically, but real people are actually suffering on a regular basis and not just on the small scale right now because of these laws.
Yeah, this marijuana is a weird one because, like you said, like you're saying, even practically, even if you were the most, what's the word, utilitarian person, and you wanted to just, and you were very comfortable with taking it case by case and never relying on any kind of broad principle or worrying about those kind of things or asking about the nature of man or something like that, right? You're getting philosophical about it. Marijuana is everywhere. It's everywhere. And it has been for decades. And it will be whether these laws change or not. They should change. We should stop. There's no reason it's like a bad lottery system where you're randomly taking a tiny fraction of the people on marijuana and punishing them.
Yeah. Yeah, and so
not enough to change behavior, right? Not enough
to wreck a lot of people's lives.
Enough to just make these poor souls who lost the lottery system more miserable. Yeah, it's silly. It's silly. It's silly at a lot of levels, and I think it's morally wrong. I think the idea, and I want to talk about this more another time because our conversation has sparked a lot of ideas about this. But I really think that people don't want to deal with the chaos of the world. They want things to be certain, and they want security. there are various authors who've made a very perceptive comments about the fact that people don't actually want freedom. They want security, and they want freedom within that security, right? They want a certain degree of it, but they don't actually want the risks and things associated with personal responsibility. And I think there's a lot of truth to that, because it actually is legitimately frightening to be responsible for yourself in a lot of ways. And ideally, frankly, you're not. Ideally, you have a family and you have friends.
Yeah, you have support structures.
Yes.
That you're not an individual building a cabin by yourself in the woods.
Yes, as libertarian as we are, Ayn Rand is wrong about a lot, right? Ayn Rand is not. Ayn Rand's like one man against the world as the epitome of virtue is actually just not.
It's missing a lot of things.
It's missing so many things.
Now don't take that the wrong way, because her insights into what government does when it interferes in the market are incredible, are prescient, and so applicable today. But some of the personal stuff, I agree with you completely in how it doesn't have to be based off of selfishness. It doesn't have to be based off of just an individual. There's so much more to life than that. Absolutely.
Yeah, and even in charitable organizations, all of these things, you should not be entirely alone. And because things go, you get unlucky, should not crush you. But again, none of this forces government action of any kind. None of this says, and that's why we have to impose on people, right? That step doesn't have to ever enter into the equation. But it's interesting to be in a world where the people around you are actually strangers. Like when I engage with people on the street or and I do talk to people on the street. I talk to people at stores. I didn't know I'd ever become that person, but here I am.
You're a weird person. It's
partially that in Texas people do that. And if you're not listening to music or things, people will talk to you more. Anyway. I'm excited because I don't know what they're going to say, right? There's something scary about that and interesting about that. And I don't know what they're like. I do know that they're not going to stab me and take my groceries. Right? I don't know it per se, but we rely on that norm, right? They're not going to steal from me. But maybe they'll say something I disagree with. Maybe they'll push me in ways that are uncomfortable, not physically. But within, I think you can have a certain limit, which is generally around violence, theft, fraud, these kind of things we've mentioned. And also allow for people to be people and have their own story and have their own path where they rise and they fall and they make mistakes and they smoke marijuana, which is a dumb idea. Don't do that. There may be reasons to do it for health reasons. It actually seems to be pretty potent for anxiety and different stuff, but I'm not an expert on that. But anyway, it's just.
But that's a great example of it. It allows for people to have their own sense of morality that's not the same as yours. You know what I mean? You can talk to someone at the store and agree diametrically with them about core ideas, about religion, about health, about all sorts of things, and still coexist. It's until you start bringing in that element of force, diametrically opposed views can actually coexist. And that's what we're talking about here.
That's right. That is what we're talking about, isn't it? That was a good...
Is that when you take force out of it...
Thank you for making a point out of what I said.
People can be different without going to war with each other. Yeah, and that's the fundamental principle behind our political beliefs.
Yes. Look at that. I have a good principle behind my political beliefs. I just discovered it, thanks to Brad.
Shut up.
No, that was. I'm half joking, but only half joking because that was really insightful. I think that's brilliant. I once read a book that talked about this, and maybe this will be our final thought. At least my final thought. That if you had to say, is there a truly common idea to all mankind upon which you could build a government that allowed for every kind of belief, not every kind of belief, because you don't want to allow for the person who wants to sacrifice you, right? but that would allow for what's the word I'm looking for? A common, not a belief in government, but a common desire that every human being shared, from which you could then deduce principles of government. And the one that he came to that I thought was really insightful was that I don't want you or anyone else to just have absolute arbitrary control over my life. And you don't want some random stranger to come in and take absolute control of your life. Now, different people may actually have someone that they want to take control of their life. Maybe a Christian wants Christ to take control of their life, or something like that. But no one wants to be ruled over by just some other random body. And if we can come together on that, we can say, well, then what are the ground rules that allow us to coexist as people who don't want to end up fighting each other to impose on each other, but want that freedom? And you can get to something like what we've been talking about. You can say, well, then you can't make war on them. You can't steal, be violent, and all these other things. And you can have people with different beliefs. Brad, you captured that so well. That's exactly why we're headed towards civil war in the United States.
Because both sides believe that it's the government's job to enforce their values on the other side. And as long as you both believe that, as long as both sides believe that, there can never be peace.
No, there can't. We're just slightly better than some barbarian horde who wants to come and make you part of their, conquer you and rule you, right? Because the violence hasn't spilled out onto the streets very often. We still believe, in partially, I think that's because both parties still believe they can win it through the political game.
Which is insane.
Which is insane and not comforting, right? That doesn't mean we're better than the violence on the street. It just means we think we've got an easier method. Right? Anyway, I don't know. It's terrifying. We were going to talk economics and some other things, but this has been a good discussion, Brad. Any other final thoughts?
Yeah. We've got some other things we wanted to talk about. We wanted to talk about Biden's made some comments about gas prices that were interesting. Also some stuff going on about inflation and interest rates with the Fed we wanted to talk about. We also wanted to talk about, what's her name? Liz Truss, the new British Prime Minister. She's getting a ton of hate for having some free market ideas, which this is all interesting stuff that's worth talking about. We may talk about it another week. We may end up never talking about it. If so,
yeah.
I'm sorry, but I just wanted to mention it real quick. These are some things that are going on that are worth talking about, that are also worth looking up, and we'll talk about what we can next week. But yeah, the final thought is that coexistence is only possible if you accept the idea that it's okay for people to be not just a little bit different from you, but fundamentally different from you.
Act in ways you think aren't moral.
The thing I keep going back to is Daily Wire, the conservative conglomerate, made up of a bunch of political pundits like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro. They actually had a conversation one time talking about this issue, because some of them are natural rights conservatives and some of them are social conservatives or common good conservatives. And they actually had this discussion, and it was, I think I never liked Ben Shapiro more than in this discussion.
Yes.
Because one of the guys, I think it was Knowles, but I'm not sure, was arguing, and he's like, yes, I think we should be able to go into someone's home and stop them from, I think it was just something as simple as cross-dressing in their own home. And it blew my mind, because that is the logical conclusion of the common good conservative principles. Is like, if this is bad, if these trans ideas are fundamentally bad for society, then yes, it is okay for government to step in and stop them. And Ben Shapiro was like, no, that is absolutely not okay, and I disagree. And that distinction is so important. And for the conservatives listening, I want you to evaluate what you believe in, because as long as you believe that it is the role of government to go into people's homes and tell them how to live, and liberals believe the exact same thing, we're never going to get out of the current, the current, pre-Civil War mentality that we have now, because it is always going to be life or death. It is always going to be all or nothing until we realize that the only solution is to coexist, is to allow people to be different without using force to stop them.
And with that, thank you for listening.
This has been an episode of Rethinking Politics. You can find us on all of the major podcasting apps or on YouTube. You can reach out to us at rethinkingpoliticspodcast@gmail.com, or you can visit our website at rethinkingpolitics.podbean.com, where you can support us via Patreon. Thanks, and have a wonderful day.